Every Friday night for 7 years, Logan Brooks walked into Mercer's diner, sat in the same corner booth, and ordered 2 plates of food. He ate one. The other sat untouched across from him until the kitchen closed and the waitress quietly took it away. Nobody asked him about it anymore. They already knew. Then one stormy November night, a woman in a wheelchair pushed through the front door, soaking wet, shaking, and looking over her shoulder like something was still chasing her, and she asked Logan if she could sit down. He looked at the untouched plate, and for the first time in 7 years, he pushed it towards someone else. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. Now let's get into it. Part 1. A seat reserved for the past. The rain started around 4 in the afternoon and hadn't let up since. By 7, the streets of Callaway were the kind of wet that made everything feel slower. The traffic lights bleeding red across the asphalt, the storefronts fogged at the windows, the gutters running loud and dirty along the curbs. Most people had already gone home. The ones who hadn't were tucked into warm places with warm drinks, not especially interested in the weather or anyone else's problems. Logan Brooks drove his truck through the center of town with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. He'd left Emma with Mrs. Patton next door, same as every Friday. Mrs. Patton was 71, moved slowly, talked constantly, and made Emma laugh in a way Logan hadn't figured out how to replicate. He appreciated the woman more than he ever told her. He brought her pies sometimes, when he remembered, which wasn't often enough. He pulled into the lot behind Mercer's diner at 6:58 and sat in the cab for a moment before cutting the engine. He didn't know why he still did this. That wasn't true. He knew exactly why he still did it. He just hadn't figured out how to stop. The diner smelled like coffee and grease and something sweet from the back. Cinnamon, maybe. And the bell above the door rang when Logan pushed through it. Patty was behind the counter, same as always. Mid-50s, hair pinned back with a clip that had seen better days, reading glasses perched on her nose, even though she never seemed to actually be reading anything. "Your usual?" she called out without looking up. "Yeah," Logan said. She wrote it down on her pad and tore it off. 2 orders of the brisket plate. Mashed potatoes, green beans, a roll on each. She'd been writing that same order for 7 years, and she never once commented on it. Logan didn't know if she was being polite or if she'd simply stopped thinking about it. Either way, he was grateful. He hung his jacket on the hook by the booth, 4th one from the window, left side, and slid into his usual seat. The vinyl creaked. The table rocked slightly when he put his elbows on it, the same leg still a little short, the same folded napkin stuffed under it that had been there since probably the Clinton administration. Outside, the rain pressed against the window glass in sheets. Logan stared at the empty seat across from him. He'd been doing this since Claire died. Not immediately. The first few months after the accident, he could barely get out of bed, let alone drive himself to a diner on a Friday night. But sometime in the 2nd year, when the numbness had started to settle into something more like a permanent ache, he'd started coming here. It had been their place. His and Claire's. They used to come every Friday, before Emma, before the mortgage on the house, before everything that had filled their lives with the good kind of busy. They'd get the brisket, share a dessert, argue about whether the pie or the cobbler was better. He still didn't know. He'd never ordered dessert without her. The plate arrived. Patty set both down without ceremony, refilled his coffee without being asked, and walked away. Logan picked up his fork and started eating the one on his side of the table. The other one steamed quietly in the booth across from him. He wasn't eating it. He never ate it. He wasn't entirely sure why he still ordered it, except that not ordering it felt like giving something up, and he wasn't ready to give it up. His therapist, a woman named Dr. Fenn, who had the patience of someone who had heard everything twice and wasn't surprised by any of it, had gently suggested, twice, that the ritual might be keeping him from moving forward. Logan had nodded and kept doing it anyway. He was about halfway through his plate when the front door opened. The bell rang, but he barely noticed it. People came in and out all night. Then the cold air hit, a hard gust of wet November, and Logan glanced up out of habit. The woman who came through the door was soaking wet. Not just caught in the rain wet, completely saturated. Her dark hair was plastered flat against her face and neck. Her coat, Expensive once, he could tell, but beaten up and dirty now, was heavy with water. She was in a wheelchair, a manual one, and she was pushing it herself with both arms, and the effort showed. Her jaw was set tight. Her knuckles were pale on the rims. She was young, 30, maybe, pretty in a way that was difficult to notice under the exhaustion. She stopped just inside the door and looked around the diner with the particular stillness of someone who had spent a long time watching rooms before entering them. Her eyes moved fast. The counter, the back, the other booths, the windows. Not curious, calculating. She was looking for exits. Logan had seen that look before. Not often, but enough to recognize it. Patty came around the counter with a towel and Logan expected her to handle it. But then the woman's eyes landed on his booth, on the empty seat across from him, specifically, and something happened to her face. The held-together expression cracked, just for a second, just enough. She wheeled toward him. Logan watched her come. She stopped at the edge of his booth, and up close she was even more exhausted than she'd looked from across the room. There was a bruise on her jaw, yellowed at the edges, a few days old. Her lips were trembling slightly, though whether from cold or nerves or something else, he couldn't tell. She looked at the untouched plate across from him. Then she looked at him. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was steadier than the rest of her. "Is anyone sitting here?" Logan looked at the plate. He looked at her. "No," he said. And before he'd really made a conscious decision about it, he reached out and pushed the plate to the edge of the table, moving it a few inches in her direction, just enough to mean something. "It's yours if you want it." She stared at him for a moment. Her throat moved. "Thank you," she said quietly, and wheeled herself up to the table. Her name was Victoria Bennett, though he didn't learn that until about 20 minutes in. She didn't offer it right away. She ate first, slowly, carefully, like someone who hadn't had a real meal in a while and was trying not to show how hungry she was. Logan didn't push. He ate his own food and drank his coffee and looked out at the rain. After a while, she said, "I can pay for this." "You don't have to." "I want to." A pause. "I have money. I'm not. I want you to know that. I'm not in the situation you might think I'm in." Logan looked at her. "I didn't think anything." She considered him. Her eyes were dark, cautious. "Most people do." "Maybe," he said, "but I wasn't." She looked back down at her food. Her grip on the fork was tight. "Victoria," she said finally. "My name is Victoria." "Logan." She nodded like she was filing it somewhere. Outside, the rain was coming down harder now. A couple near the front of the diner was arguing quietly about whether to make a run for their car. An older man at the counter had fallen asleep over his pie. Patty was wiping down the coffee machine with the mechanical focus of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "You come here often?" Victoria asked, and the second the words were out, she made a face. "That sounded worse than I intended." Logan almost smiled. "Every Friday." "Always alone?" He hesitated, long enough that she noticed. "Sorry," she said quickly. "That's not my business." "It's fine." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "My wife and I used to come here, every Friday. We had the same booth." He didn't look at the plate he'd pushed toward her, but he was aware of it anyway. "She passed away 6 years ago." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." He always said thank you. It was the correct response and also the only one he'd ever found that didn't require more explaining. "How old is she?" Victoria asked. Logan looked at her. She nodded at his left hand where the faint indent from his wedding ring was still visible, even though he'd taken it off 2 years ago on the recommendation of Dr. Fenn. He'd taken it off his finger and put it in the box in the nightstand drawer, and then he'd worn it again for 2 days before taking it off again, and it had been back in the drawer since then. 6, he said. "Her name is Emma." For the first time, Victoria's expression softened into something that looked genuinely warm. "That's a good age?" "Most of the time." "What does she think about you coming here alone every Friday?" "She doesn't know it's every Friday," Logan said. "She thinks I just like the brisket." "Do you?" "It's decent brisket." Victoria actually laughed at that. A short, quiet sound, involuntary, like it surprised her. She covered it quickly, pressing her lips together. But it had already happened. and something about it changed the air between them. She looked back down at her plate. After a moment, she said, "I appreciate this, more than you know. It's just dinner." "It's not just dinner," she said, but she didn't elaborate, and Logan didn't push. She was still there when the diner started emptying out at 9:30. She'd had 2 cups of coffee, and Logan had had 3, and at some point the conversation had moved from polite and careful into something more like actual talking, the way that sometimes happens between strangers in a contained space, with rain on the windows and nowhere particular to be. He found out she'd grown up in Hartford, that she had an older brother she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, for reasons she described only as complicated, that she had a degree in finance and another in business administration, which she'd worked for herself while also working 2 jobs, and he could tell from the way she said it that she was proud of the degree in a way that had nothing to do with the title it carried. What she didn't tell him was where she was staying, or why she'd been out in the rain at 7 o'clock on a November night, or how long she'd been in Callaway, or how she'd arrived, or what the bruise on her jaw was from. Logan noticed all of that. He didn't mention any of it. He'd learned in the years since Claire died that there was a difference between not knowing something and not needing to know it yet. People told you what they were ready to tell you. Pushing didn't speed that up. It just made them pull back, and then you lost even the smaller things they might have given you freely. Around 9:45, Patty started putting the chairs up on the empty tables near the front of the diner. Victoria watched this and then looked at the window. "The rain slowed down," she said. It had a little. Still coming, but not the same violence it had been earlier. "Where are you headed?" Logan asked. She was quiet for a moment too long. "I haven't figured that part out yet." He looked at her. She was staring at the table, her jaw tight again, the held-together expression reassembling itself the way he'd seen it fall apart when she first walked in. He thought about Emma at Mrs. Patton's. He thought about the house, which was quiet on Friday nights in a way that had always felt heavier than any other night of the week. "There's a motel on Birch Street," he said. "The Kessler. It's not fancy, but it's clean, and the woman at the desk is decent. She won't ask you a lot of questions." Victoria looked at him. "She owes me a favor," Logan added. "I can call ahead if you want." For a second he thought she was going to say no. Her expression did something complicated, gratitude and suspicion moving through it at the same time, not quite resolving. "Why are you being this kind to me?" she asked. Not hostile. Genuinely asking. Logan thought about it. "I don't know," he said honestly. "You looked like you needed somewhere to sit." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the window. "Make the call," she said quietly. The motel on Birch Street had a ramp out front that was cracked in 2 places and probably hadn't been used in years. Logan got out of his truck and went around to the back without asking, and Victoria let him help her down without saying anything, which he understood was its own kind of trust. The woman at the desk was Donna Kessler, 70 years old and built like someone who had never taken nonsense from anyone and didn't intend to start. She took one look at Victoria and then at Logan and then back at Victoria and handed over a key card. "Room 6 is on the ground floor," she said. "Towels are in the closet. You need anything, the number is on the phone." "Thank you," Victoria said. "Don't thank me," Donna said, but not unkindly. "Thank the weather." Logan walked with Victoria to room 6. The hallway was narrow and he slowed his pace without thinking about it. She didn't comment. At the door, she swiped the key card and the lock clicked open. She stopped in the doorway without going in, turned slightly. "Logan," she said. "Yeah." "The plate." She paused. "The one you pushed toward me. That wasn't just an extra order, was it?" It wasn't a question. He'd been waiting for it. "No," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Her eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with tonight, and he thought he understood that kind of tired, the kind that accumulated over years. "She would have been kind to a stranger," Victoria said. "I think." Logan felt something press against the inside of his chest. Hard and unexpected. "Yeah," he said, after a moment. "She would have." Victoria nodded, just once. "Good night, Logan." "Good night." She went inside. The door clicked shut behind her. Logan stood in the hallway for a second longer than was necessary, and then he walked back out to his truck in the rain. He told Emma the next morning that he'd had a good night. Emma was 6, and she processed information with the unfiltered directness of someone who hadn't yet learned that questions could make people uncomfortable. She was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate that was mostly gone, wearing the oversized sleep shirt that had cartoon dinosaurs on it and dragged past her knees. "Did you eat both plates?" she asked. Logan poured himself coffee. "No." "Did someone sit with you?" He turned from the counter and looked at her. She was watching him with her mother's eyes. Dark brown, patient, taking in more than she let on. "A woman came in out of the rain," he said. Emma considered this with great seriousness. "Was she nice?" "I think so," he said. "She's been through some hard things." "Like us?" Logan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He looked at his daughter, at her serious little face and the hot chocolate mustache she hadn't noticed yet, and felt the familiar, complicated weight of love and inadequacy that came with single parenthood. "Different hard things," he said. "But yeah, like us." Emma nodded slowly. Then she picked up her mug and drank the last of her hot chocolate with both hands and said, completely matter of fact, "Maybe she needs a friend." Logan looked at her. "Maybe," he said. He didn't expect to see Victoria again. That was what he told himself on Saturday morning when he was stacking wood out back, and on Saturday afternoon when he drove Emma to her soccer practice, and on Sunday when he made pancakes and checked his phone for no reason he wanted to examine too closely. And then on Monday morning, he was at the hardware store picking up caulking for the kitchen window when he almost ran into her in the paint aisle. She was reaching for a color chip from the rack on the wall, just looking, apparently, not buying, and she startled when he came around the corner, her hand jerking back, her whole body tensing in that coiled, ready-to-run way he'd noticed at the diner. "Sorry," Logan said immediately, stopping 2 feet back. "Didn't mean to." "No, it's—" She let out a breath, pressing her hand flat on her thigh. "I'm fine, I just—" She shook her head. "Sorry, I startle easily." "Don't apologize." He held up his hand, easy, no threat. "I should have made more noise." She looked at him. The wariness was still there, but it settled slightly. "Logan." "Victoria." She glanced down the aisle, both ways, before looking back at him. The checking the room thing again. "How's the motel?" he asked. "Fine. Good, actually." A small hesitation. "Donna made me breakfast this morning. She said she doesn't usually, but—" She shrugged with one shoulder. "She made an exception." "She does that," Logan said. "She pretends she doesn't, but she does." Victoria almost smiled. "I'm starting to think this is a very specific kind of town." "Callaway's something," he agreed. He picked up his caulking from the shelf, turned it over in his hands. "How long are you staying?" She was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet." She said it in a way that meant she had reasons she wasn't sharing. "That depends on a few things." Logan nodded. He didn't push. "Emma asked about you," he said instead. Victoria blinked. "She doesn't know me." "No, but she knows about you." He looked at the caulking tube. "She said you might need a friend." Victoria stared at him. Something moved across her face. Not quite undone, but close to it, close enough that she looked away quickly. "She sounds like a remarkable kid," she said, her voice a little careful. "She's better than me," Logan said simply. Victoria looked back at him then, and there was something in her expression he couldn't entirely read, something that was working to stay controlled and not entirely succeeding. "I'll be around," she said finally, if it's all right to be around." "It's all right," Logan said. She started coming to the diner on other nights. Not just Friday, not in any planned way. Logan would show up for lunch on a Wednesday and find her in a corner booth, or he'd stop in for coffee on a Saturday morning, and she'd already be there, nursing a cup and reading on her tablet, and they'd end up talking for an hour without either of them quite deciding to. It was easy in a way that didn't entirely make sense given how careful she was about everything else. He learned her in pieces, the way you did with someone who'd learned to protect what they kept. She was sharp, the kind of sharp that was almost aggressive when she engaged with a problem. the kind that didn't suffer slow thinking or bad logic. She had strong opinions about supply chains, real estate law, and terrible opinions about coffee, which she drank too strong and too often. She was allergic to nuts and always checked menus twice. She didn't talk about her past. She talked about her work, the company she'd built, an operations firm that had grown faster than she'd planned, with clients in 4 states. She talked about it carefully, like someone handling something both valuable and fragile, and Logan noticed she always used the past tense without seeming to realize it. "You're not running it right now?" he asked one afternoon. A pause. "It's complicated." "You said that about your brother, too." She looked at him. "Are you keeping score?" "Just noticing patterns." She turned her coffee cup around twice before she spoke. "Someone is trying to take it from me," she said. Her voice was level, controlled. "The company. And more than the company." She stopped. I can't get into all of it. Not yet." "Okay," Logan said. She looked at him, clearly waiting for the follow-up question, the push. When it didn't come, something in her loosened slightly. "Okay," she repeated, quieter. Cha. Emma met her on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the night in the diner. Logan hadn't planned it. He'd brought Emma into town to pick up her winter boots from the shoe repair, and they'd stopped for hot chocolate at Mercer's because Emma had asked 4 times. And Victoria had been there, in her corner booth, tablet open, strong, terrible coffee. Emma saw her first. "Is that her?" she whispered loudly, from approximately 2 feet away. Logan winced. "Emma." But Victoria had already looked up. She looked at Emma, this small, watchful 6-year-old with her mother's eyes and her father's serious mouth, and her expression did something private and complicated. "Hi," Emma said straightforwardly. "I'm Emma. My dad says you've been through hard things." "Emma." Logan pressed his hand lightly on her shoulder, but Victoria shook her head, a small smile starting at the corner of her mouth. "Hi, Emma." She held out her hand. "I'm Victoria. Your dad is right." Emma shook her hand with great formality, because she'd learned handshakes at school and took them very seriously. "Are you feeling better?" she asked. "A little bit," Victoria said. "Hard things take time," Emma told her. "That's what Dad says." Victoria looked at Logan. He looked at the ceiling. "Your dad is pretty smart," Victoria said. "Sometimes," Emma said, with the blunt assessment of a child who had a complete and honest inventory of all parental strengths and weaknesses. "He's also bad at braiding hair." "That's fair," Logan said. Emma climbed into the booth across from Victoria without being invited, because she was 6, and the concept of social inertia had not yet occurred to her, and for the next 45 minutes she told Victoria about soccer and her class hamster named Biscuit, and the specific injustice of a kid named Tyler who had taken her pencil eraser and not given it back. Victoria listened to all of it with complete, undivided attention. She asked follow-up questions about Tyler. She expressed appropriate outrage about Biscuit being locked in a cage. She told Emma about a soccer game she'd gone to in college, and Emma wanted every detail, and Logan sat back in the booth with his coffee and watched the two of them and felt something shift inside him that he didn't have a name for yet. When they finally left, Emma pulling on her coat and promising to tell Victoria what happened with Tyler, as if this was now an ongoing legal case they were both invested in, Victoria looked up at Logan from her wheelchair and said, quietly so Emma couldn't hear, "She's incredible." "I know," he said. "You should tell her that more." "I do." "Tell her more than you think is necessary," Victoria said. "That's the amount that's actually right." Logan looked at her. There was something tight in her voice when she said it, something old. "Okay," he said. She nodded, looking back down at her tablet, but she wasn't reading it. It was a Tuesday night in December when she finally told him. Not everything, not all at once, but the beginning of it, which was the hardest part. They were sitting in his living room. She'd come by after Emma was in bed, which had started happening once or twice a week without either of them establishing it as a thing. Logan made coffee. Victoria sat on the end of the couch with her legs tucked sideways, her wheelchair folded up against the wall, and she talked for almost 2 hours. She talked about Marcus Hale. She talked about how she'd met him when she was 23, when her company was 2 years old and barely surviving, and he'd appeared with money and connections, and a certainty about everything that she'd mistaken for strength. She talked about the engagement and the slow, gradual way things had gone wrong, not in obvious dramatic moments, but in small erosions, a comment here, a restriction there, the way her own judgment had started to feel like the problem rather than his behavior. She talked about the night of the accident. She'd been driving home from a meeting that Marcus had told her to cancel. There had been an argument on the phone. She'd been crying, distracted, and she'd driven the car off the embankment, and the damage to her spine was permanent, and when she woke up in the hospital, Marcus was there with lawyers. The documents she signed in that room, she'd been on pain medication, barely coherent, transferred a majority stake in her company to a holding company Marcus controlled. There was a settlement agreement with an NDA. There were witnesses, paid or coerced, who would testify that she'd been drinking. Marcus had framed the entire thing as protecting her, keeping it quiet, preventing scandal. By the time she understood what had happened, the legal structures around her were like a cage. She'd spent 3 years fighting it quietly, building a case, gathering evidence. Then Marcus had found out she was talking to attorneys, and the pressure had turned into something more direct. She'd spent the last several months moving, staying ahead of it. Callaway was the 4th town in 8 months. When she finished talking, the room was quiet for a long time. Logan was looking at his hands. He'd been holding his coffee cup so long it had gone cold. "The bruise," he said finally. "When you came into the diner." Her jaw went tight. "Someone he sent. To do what?" "To remind me what cooperation looks like." Logan put his coffee cup down on the table. He did it carefully, with deliberate control, because the feeling that had moved through him just then was not careful or controlled, and he didn't want it coming out sideways at someone who didn't deserve it. "Victoria," he said, "you don't have to say anything." "I'm going to say something." He looked at her. "You're not doing this alone anymore." She looked at him with that expression she got when something was hitting her harder than she wanted it to, when the walls were doing their job less efficiently than intended. "You don't know what you're saying," she said. "He has lawyers, influence, money. He's connected to people in ways that—" "I have a daughter," Logan said quietly, "and she has already decided you matter, so—" He held her gaze. "Tell me what you need." Victoria was quiet for a long time. Outside, the December wind moved through the street, rattling the storm windows. The porch light Logan had left on since the night Claire died threw a yellow wash across the front walk. "I need someone who isn't going to run," Victoria said finally. "Then you've got the right person," Logan said. She looked at him for a moment, really looked at him, with all the wariness stripped away for just a second. Then she looked down. "Okay," she said, very quietly. "Okay," he agreed. The coffee had gone cold. Neither of them moved to warm it up. Logan made a list the next morning. Not a dramatic list, not a plan of action with bullet points and timelines. Just a piece of paper on the kitchen counter with names on it, people he knew, people who owed him something, people who might know someone useful. He stood over it with his coffee while Emma ate cereal at the table behind him, and he stared at it long enough that Emma asked if he was okay. "Fine," he said. "Just thinking." "You make a face when you think," she told him. "What kind of face?" She demonstrated. Forehead creased, lips pressed flat, eyes slightly unfocused. It was accurate enough that he felt briefly self-conscious. "I'll work on that," he said. She went back to her cereal. He looked at the list. The names weren't lawyers yet. He didn't know lawyers, not the kind that could go up against someone like Marcus Hale. But he knew Ray Coulter, who'd spent 20 years as a county investigator before his knees gave out, and he'd retired to Callaway to run a small private practice out of his garage. He knew Deborah Finch at the county courthouse, who had access to public records and a general distaste for people who used the legal system as a weapon. And he knew, more distantly, a woman named Sylvia Park, who had once worked corporate law in Hartford before she'd burned out and moved back to her hometown to do estate planning and the occasional contract dispute. None of these people were going to dismantle Marcus Hale on their own, but they were a starting point, and Logan had learned from years of construction work and single parenthood and grief that starting points were the whole thing. You didn't get to the middle without them. He folded the list and put it in his jacket pocket and drove Emma to school. He called Ray Coulter first because Ray was practical and didn't waste words, which Logan appreciated. Ray listened to the outline without interrupting. When Logan finished, there was a pause on the line, the sound of something being set down. A mug, probably. Ray drank tea now on doctor's orders and complained about it constantly. Corporate fraud, coerced documents, potential witness intimidation, Ray said, and physical intimidation. Yes. And this has been going on for how long? 7 years, roughly. The active pressure, the last 3. Another pause. She's been carrying this alone for 3 years? Yes. Ray made a sound that was not quite a word, more like a compressed judgment. Send me what you have, whatever she's willing to share. I'll start pulling public records on this Hale, corporate filings, litigation history, any civil suits. That kind of operation leaves tracks. Thank you, Ray. Don't thank me yet. This could be a wall. A beat. But probably not a wall with nothing behind it. These guys never are. Logan hung up and sat in his truck in the school parking lot for a moment, watching the other parents file out in their coats and their hurry. And he thought about the way Victoria had looked the night before when she'd said she needed someone who wasn't going to run. Like she'd said it knowing the answer was probably going to be different. He drove to Mercer's. She was there. He'd half expected her to be gone, to have packed whatever she had in that motel room and moved on to the 5th town, because that was the pattern she'd built, and patterns were hard to stop even when you wanted to. But she was in her corner booth, coffee on the table, and when he walked in and she saw him, something in her face settled instead of tensing. That was new. He noticed it. He slid into the booth across from her. Patty brought him coffee without asking. I called someone this morning, he said. Victoria looked at him. Already. His name is Ray Coulter, former county investigator, 20 years. He's good and he's discreet. Logan wrapped his hands around the mug. He's going to start pulling public records on Marcus, corporate filings, litigation history. There won't be much in public records, Victoria said. He's careful about what shows up. Maybe, but careful people still leave edges. He paused. Ray's good at edges. She was looking at him with an expression that was trying to stay neutral and not entirely succeeding. Logan, I don't want you to think this is simple. The last attorney I hired, Marcus found out in 6 days and had her firm's partnership under review by a state board within 2 weeks. He makes it costly. I know. I don't think you do. Not fully. Probably not, Logan agreed, but I've got less to lose than a law firm partnership. He met her eyes. Tell me what documentation you have, what you've kept. The original documents, any evidence you've gathered, communications, whatever exists. Victoria held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at her coffee. I have a drive, she said. Encrypted. I've been building it for 3 years. She paused. Copies of the documents I signed in the hospital, obtained from a source inside the hospital I trust. Emails. Financial records from the period before the accident that show what he was doing with the company's stake before I transferred it. Testimony from 2 former employees who were willing to put things in writing, off the record. She stopped. It's not nothing, but it wasn't enough to go to court with, and every time I got close to enough, something would happen. What kind of something? Threatening something. Once someone tampered with the ramp on my van. She said it flat, like a fact, but her jaw was tight. Another time, the attorney I was working with received photographs of his family at their home. No note, just photographs. The kitchen in the back of the diner was making noise, pans, the exhaust fan, someone giving a food order to someone else. Normal sounds. Logan focused on keeping his voice level. Okay, he said. Okay? She repeated. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I told you that. So tell me what the drive has and we'll figure out what's missing. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her doing the internal calculation, the weighing of risk against need, the assessment of whether to trust, the kind of math that people do when they've been hurt badly enough that trust feels like exposure. Then she reached into the bag on her armrest and set a small black drive on the table between them. "Everything's in folders," she said. "The labels are dates. The ones marked with a star are the most critical." Logan looked at the drive. He didn't pick it up. "I'll get this to Ray today," he said. "He'll be careful with it." "He'd better be," Victoria said, but it came out quieter than the words suggested. Less hard. December moved through Callaway the way it usually did, cold and gray and occasionally beautiful, with hoarfrost on the windows in the mornings and the smell of wood smoke drifting through the neighborhood in the evenings. Logan split firewood on the weekends and took Emma sledding on the hill behind the elementary school and made a point of having dinner ready when he said he would have dinner ready, because Emma had gone through a phase the previous year of asking, with increasing anxiety, whether he was going to be late, and he'd learned that consistency was the thing she needed most. Emma knew something was different. She was 6, not inattentive. She noticed that Victoria came to dinner on Thursdays now, sitting at the table with her wheelchair pulled up to the end and passing the green beans and arguing gently with Logan about whether chili should have beans in it, which was apparently a matter of principle for both of them and which Emma found deeply funny. She noticed that her father checked his phone differently, with something more like purpose, less like habit. She noticed that Logan laughed more than he had before, and she didn't say anything about this because she was 6, and she understood instinctively that pointing at something sometimes made it go away. What she did do was start saving her drawings for Victoria. Not all of them. Emma was selective about her drawings. She made them constantly, on whatever paper was available, but she had a clear internal hierarchy of which ones were worth keeping and which weren't. The ones she saved for Victoria were the good ones. A house with a yellow porch light, a woman in a wheelchair surrounded by flowers, a stick figure family that was unmistakably Logan and Emma, and a third figure that Emma had given dark hair and left otherwise up to interpretation. Victoria received each one with the specific kind of care that people use when they're trying not to make something a bigger deal than it is, because making it a bigger deal would undo them. She kept all of them. Logan saw them, carefully folded, in the front pocket of her bag. Ray called in the second week of December with a voice that meant something. Logan was in the crawl space under the back of the house, re-insulating. December drafts had gotten worse every year and he'd been putting off dealing with it since October. He had insulation in his hair and his phone kept sliding out of his jacket pocket, and Ray's voice came through with the particular flat steadiness of someone who has found something that confirms what they suspected. "The holding company that received her company stake," Ray said. "It's a shell, 3 layers deep, but the third layer connects to a real estate trust registered in Delaware under a different name that Marcus Hale's mother incorporated in 2009. A pause. "He's had this structure in place for years. Before your friend." Logan set down the insulation roll. "He built this before Victoria. Infrastructure, yes, the kind you build when you're planning to do this more than once." "More than once," Logan repeated. "I found a civil suit from 2014. Different woman, different state. Filed and then suddenly dropped." Ray's voice was careful. "The pattern is there, Logan. It'll take time to surface, and it'll take someone who knows how to read corporate documents, but it's there." Logan was quiet for a moment, his hand flat against the cold foundation wall. "I have someone in mind for the documents," he said. "I'll reach out today." "Yeah." Sylvia Park had an office above a dry cleaner on Callaway's Main Street that smelled faintly of cleaning fluid and strongly of old books. She was 53, had spent 15 years doing M&A work in Hartford, and had left the city with something between burnout and disgust that she'd never fully elaborated on, but which showed up occasionally as a reflexive narrowing of her eyes when corporate structures were mentioned. Logan had done work on her house twice, the porch, and then later the garage after the roof had sagged. She had paid fairly and brought him coffee without prompting. He'd called ahead, so she was expecting him. Victoria came with him, which Logan hadn't pushed for. It was her case, her call. But Victoria had said, with the calm decisiveness that came out when she stopped hedging, that she was tired of sitting in waiting rooms while other people handled her life. Sylvia read through Ray's initial summary at her desk while they sat across from her, and then she was quiet for a long time, which Logan had come to understand was her version of being actively engaged rather than the version that meant nothing was happening. The Delaware trust structure is a real problem for him, she said finally, because it establishes premeditation. You can't accidentally build a three-layer shell corporation. She looked at Victoria over her reading glasses. The hospital documents, the ones you signed under medication. Do you have the medical records from that admission, the ones showing what you were on and the timing? Yes, Victoria said. Good. That's consent capacity. That's potentially the whole foundation of the original transfer. Sylvia took her glasses off. I want to be honest with you. This is not going to move quickly. And it is going to be uncomfortable, because the moment we start filing motions, he's going to know. He already suspects I'm somewhere, Victoria said. I've been careful, but he's been looking. She paused. I'd rather start swinging than keep hiding. Sylvia looked at her for a moment. Something like respect moved across her expression. All right, she said. Let me see the drive. Guts. The comfortable rhythm of those December weeks was something Logan hadn't expected to feel complicated about, but it did. Not because anything was wrong. Things were in the cautious and provisional way that mattered, going in a direction that felt possible. But because Logan was becoming aware of something in himself that he didn't quite know how to categorize. It wasn't simple. He was clear enough on that. He was 32 and he hadn't been close to anyone. Not close in the way that involved vulnerability, not close in the way that meant something, since Claire died. He'd dated briefly, twice, in the 4th year after the accident, and both times had been fine in the way that fine meant nothing was wrong and also nothing was right. He'd stopped trying after the second one, not from heartbreak, but from exhaustion, from the sense that he was doing an impression of someone who was ready when he wasn't. He wasn't sure he was ready now either. But what he felt around Victoria was different from what he'd been trying to manufacture during those 2 attempts at dating. It wasn't effort. It was just there. A specific awareness of her when she was in the room. The way he paid attention when she was talking, not because he was trying to be a good listener, but because he actually wanted to hear what she was going to say next. He didn't know what to do with that, so he didn't do anything with it. He just kept showing up. The thing about Victoria that Logan hadn't initially understood was that her strength wasn't absence of feeling. It was control of it. She felt things very deeply, he was coming to see. She just had years of practice not showing it. The cracks showed in small ways. The way she went quiet for a beat too long when Emma climbed into her lap during a movie without asking. The way she sometimes looked at Logan's kitchen. The cluttered, imperfect living-in kitchen with its stack of Emma's drawings on the counter and the magnets on the fridge and the cracked tile above the stove that Logan kept meaning to replace, with an expression that was hard to name but wasn't neutral. Once she'd said, "This house feels like a place people actually live." Logan had looked around at it, the mess and the wear of it, the things he'd meant to fix and hadn't. That's one way to put it. I grew up in a house that felt like a photograph, she said. Everything in the right place. Nothing that looked like anyone had touched it. She paused. I thought that was what a home was supposed to be for a long time. Marcus's house was like that, Logan said. Not a question. She looked at her coffee. His whole life was like that. Everything arranged, everything positioned. She stopped. I didn't see it for what it was until I was inside it. Logan watched her for a moment. What did it look like from inside? She thought about it. Like control, she said. Like every surface was a performance, and any mess I made was a problem I was responsible for. They were sitting at Logan's kitchen table, and Emma was in the next room making what she'd described as a very important castle out of couch cushions. And the house was warm and slightly disorganized, and Logan thought about the porch light outside, the one he'd kept on since Claire. He thought about what it would mean to have spent years inside a life that was beautiful from the outside and hollow from the inside, and then to find yourself in a stranger's messy kitchen that felt more real than anything you'd had in years. You deserve a kitchen with stuff on the counter, he said. Victoria looked up at him. The expression on her face was one of those ones she tried to neutralize and couldn't quite. That might be the strangest thing anyone has ever said to me, she said. Probably, Logan agreed. And she laughed. A real one. Not the short, involuntary one from the diner, but a fuller sound, surprised out of her, and Logan felt it settle somewhere in his chest like something that had been tipped over getting set back upright. The call that changed the temperature of everything came on a Thursday evening in the third week of December. Victoria was at the motel. Logan had driven Emma to Mrs. Patton's for a sleepover. Emma had an ongoing project with Mrs. Patton involving a jigsaw puzzle of several thousand pieces depicting the solar system, which they were apparently completing in secret and which Emma described in whispered tones as if it were classified. And he was on his way home when his phone rang. It was Ray. "He's moving," Ray said without preamble. Logan pulled to the side of the road. "What do you mean, moving?" Someone ran a search on a credit card linked to a name Victoria may have been using. It pinged a transaction in Callaway. Ray's voice was steady but fast. "I can't tell you how he found it, but it's recent. Last 48 hours. Logan stared at the road ahead. The streetlights were on, the town quiet and winter dark. "Does she know?" "Not yet. I called you first because I need you to help me figure out how to tell her without her running." "She won't run," Logan said. But even as he said it, he felt the uncertainty in it. She might. Running was the pattern, and patterns had weight. "Get to her," Ray said. "Tonight." He called her from the car. She picked up on the second ring. "Someone ran a search on your card," he said. "Ray just called. Hale may know you're here." There was silence on the line. Then, "How long?" 48 hours, maybe. We don't know if he's moved on it yet." More silence. He could hear her breathing. "Victoria." He kept his voice even. "I need you to listen to me. Running is not the answer this time. We have Sylvia, we have Ray, we have 3 years of evidence on a drive. Running puts you back at 0. Logan, if he gets here before we have anything filed, then we accelerate the filing." He was already turning the truck around. "But I need you to stay." Silence. Long enough that he felt it in his chest. "I've been running for 8 months, she said. Her voice was different, stripped of the control. Just tired. Tired in the bone-deep way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'm so tired of running." "Then stop," he said. "Stay. Let us build the wall instead of looking for the next door." Another long silence. "Okay," she said finally. He pulled into the motel lot 2 minutes later, and she was sitting on the covered walkway outside room 6, her coat on, her bag on her lap. Not packed, just held, the way you hold something when you're fighting the instinct to move. He parked and got out and walked toward her, and she looked up at him in the yellow parking lot light, and her eyes were wet in a way she was clearly angry at herself for. "I almost left," she said. "I know," he said. He sat down on the bench beside her. "But you didn't." She looked at the parking lot. Her jaw was tight. "If he comes here—" "When he comes," Logan said. "Not if, when. And we'll be ready." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression, something cracked open and honest, the walls down further than they'd ever been. And she said quietly, "I don't know how to let people help me." "I noticed," he said. "I'm working on it." "I noticed that too." She let out a breath that was something between a laugh and a sigh, and it was the most human sound he'd heard from her. And he thought, sitting in the cold December parking lot with the motel light humming above them, that whatever was happening here, between the two of them, between all the broken things they were each trying to hold, it was something he didn't want to walk away from. He didn't say that. It wasn't the moment for it. What he said was, "Come for dinner tomorrow. Bring your laptop. We'll go over everything Sylvia needs and figure out what we can file first." Victoria looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. "And Emma is making you a drawing," he added. "She told me this morning. She said it's her best one yet." Victoria looked away, down the empty parking lot, and blinked once. "I'll be there," she said quietly. S. Sylvia filed the first motion on a Monday morning in January. It wasn't the big move, not yet. It was a petition to review the consent capacity of documents signed during a documented period of medical incapacitation, a procedural step that sounded dry until you understood what it was actually doing, which was planting a flag, saying, "We are here, we are not afraid, and we are coming." Sylvia had explained it to them the Friday before, sitting at Logan's kitchen table with her reading glasses on and the drive open on her laptop. Emma had been in bed, The house had been quiet except for the wind off the fields and the occasional creak of the old structure settling. Filing this tells him two things, Sylvia said. One, that she has legal representation who knows what they're doing. Two, that she's not hiding anymore. She looked at Victoria over her glasses. He will respond. He has the resources to respond fast and hard. You need to be prepared for that. I've been preparing for 3 years, Victoria said. Preparing to run isn't the same as preparing to fight. Victoria held her gaze. I know the difference. Sylvia had looked at her for a moment longer, and then she'd nodded. A short, decisive nod, the kind that meant the assessment had been made and the conclusion was acceptable. Good, she said. Then we file Monday. Quote. The response came faster than even Sylvia had anticipated. By Wednesday, Marcus Hale's legal team had filed a counter motion, a dense, expertly constructed document disputing the petition on procedural grounds and attaching, as supporting evidence, a medical assessment from a physician Logan had never heard of, claiming Victoria's memory of the events in question was unreliable due to trauma-related cognitive distortion. Sylvia read through it at her desk while Logan and Victoria sat across from her. She read it twice. Then she set it down with the particular stillness that meant she was angrier than she was showing. He found a doctor to say her memory is compromised, she said, which means he's been preparing this too. This wasn't written in 3 days. She looked at Victoria. He had this in a drawer. Victoria's hands were folded in her lap. Her face was composed in that way she had when something was hitting harder than she intended to show. He anticipated I'd eventually file something. Yes, Sylvia pulled her glasses off. This is going to get uglier before it gets cleaner. I want you to know that. Tell me something I don't know, Victoria said quietly. Logan was looking at the counter motion on the desk. He'd read enough of it to understand the shape of it. Not the legal language, but the intent underneath, which was to make Victoria seem unstable, unreliable. A woman whose account of events couldn't be trusted. It was precise and it was vicious, and it had clearly been designed by someone who understood exactly where to press. Ray found the 2014 case, Logan said, the woman in Connecticut. If we can get her to talk, one step at a time, Sylvia said. Right now I need the medical records from the hospital admission, every page. And I need the name of that source who obtained them for you originally, because I may need a declaration. Victoria nodded. I'll make the call today. The town knew something was happening. Callaway was the kind of place where things got around. Not maliciously, mostly, just because people talked, and the circles were small, and there wasn't much that stayed private for long. The fact that Logan Brooks was involved in something legal, something serious, with the woman who'd been staying at Donna Kessler's motel since November, that had been circulating in various forms since sometime in December. Most of it was background noise, but Logan started noticing in the second week of January a car he didn't recognize parked on different corners of his street on different days. A dark blue sedan, always a different position, always with someone inside who seemed very interested in being uninteresting. He wrote down the plate number and gave it to Ray without saying anything to Victoria about it yet. Ray ran it the same afternoon. Rental, Ray said, out of Hartford. The agency won't give me the name without a subpoena, but the rental date lines up with 2 days after your friend's card transaction got flagged. A pause. He's got someone here. Watching. Logan stood in his kitchen and looked out the window at the empty street. Emma was at school. The house was quiet. How close is Sylvia to having something she can take to a judge? He asked. You'd have to ask her, but Logan... Ray stopped. This escalating means you need to talk to your local sheriff. Not because you need him to do something yet, just because he needs to know what's coming. Logan thought about that. You think it'll get physical. I think Marcus Hale has used physical pressure before and it's worked before, Ray said. That changes when there's documentation and witnesses and law enforcement who've been briefed. It doesn't change on its own. So, Sheriff Dale Morrow had been running Callaway's small department for 11 years and had the particular quality of a man who had heard most things and reacted to very few of them with anything beyond a measured nod. He'd known Logan casually for years. Logan had done some work on the county maintenance building, and Morrow had a habit of bringing coffee to job sites, which had always struck Logan as an oddly decent thing for a man in his position to do. Logan went to the station on a Thursday morning and told him everything. Not the legal details, that was Sylvia's territory, but the shape of it, the surveillance car, the history of physical intimidation, the bruise Victoria had come to town with. Morrow listened with his arms crossed and his face doing nothing in particular, which Logan had come to understand was his version of deep attention. When Logan finished, Morrow said, "You got the plate number?" "I gave it to Ray Coulter." "Good." Morrow tipped his chin. "Tell your friend to document everything. Dates, times, photographs where she can get them. Anything that feels like pressure, I want to know about it immediately." He paused. "I can't do anything preemptive on a rental car sitting on a public street, but I can be very present very fast if something changes." "That's what I needed to hear," Logan said. Morrow looked at him for a moment. "Logan," a short pause. "This woman, she's not just a friend you're helping out." It wasn't quite a question. Logan met his eyes. "She's important," Logan said. It was the truest thing he could say that he also felt ready to say out loud. Morrow nodded once, without comment, and that was the end of it. Victoria found out about the surveillance car on a Friday evening. Logan had been planning to tell her he'd been waiting for a moment that wasn't already loaded with something else, which in the current stretch of weeks was hard to find. But Ray called while Victoria was at the house for dinner, and Logan stepped out to the back porch to take the call, and when he came back in, Victoria read his face before he said a word. "What happened?" she said. "Not a question." Emma was in the living room, nominally watching a nature documentary, actually drawing, the television mostly ambient noise. Logan lowered his voice anyway. "There's a car," he said. "A rental. Been parked on the street several days this week. Ray thinks it's someone Marcus sent." Victoria's expression went very still. "He's already here," she said. "Someone he sent is here. We don't know if Marcus himself." "He'll come himself," she said flatly. "He always comes himself for the last part. He sends people first to track, to confirm. Then he comes." She was looking at the table, her hands very still on the surface. "He wants to see my face when I run." Logan sat down across from her. "You're not running." "I know I'm not running." She looked up, and her eyes were hard in a way he hadn't seen before. Not scared, something past scared. Something that had been scared for a long time, and come out the other side into something more like cold. "I know that, but he doesn't know that yet. He's expecting to arrive and find a woman who's been served with a countermotion and is already 2 steps toward the door. And instead he's going to find Sylvia Park's signature on a formal brief," Logan said. "We need more than a brief by the time he walks into this town," Victoria said. "We need it airtight. We need people present who have authority." She paused. "I need him to see that it's over before he tries to make it worse." Logan looked at her. The kitchen was warm, the dinner dishes still on the table, Emma's laughter drifting in softly from the living room over the sound of the documentary. The whole scene was domestic and ordinary, and also completely the wrong context for what they were talking about. And somehow, the contrast made it feel more serious, not less. "I'm going to call Ray and Sylvia tonight," he said. "We push for whatever she can have ready fastest. Not perfect. Ready." "It has to be enough to hold," Victoria said. "It will be." He said it with more certainty than he fully had, and they both probably knew that. But she didn't challenge it. Sylvia worked that weekend without stopping. Logan knew this because she called him twice on Saturday with questions about documentation chains, and once on Sunday to ask him to get a signed declaration from Donna Kessler about the condition Victoria had been in when she arrived in November. Not testimony, just a factual account from someone who'd observed her. Donna gave it without hesitation and without asking Logan why he needed it, for which he was grateful. Ray, meanwhile, had found the woman from the 2014 Connecticut case. Her name was Patricia Ellison. She'd been a marketing executive, 34 years old at the time, who'd briefly entered into a business arrangement with Marcus Hale's firm and found herself, over the course of 8 months, pressured out of a consulting contract she'd built from scratch. The civil suit had been dropped after, as Ray put it, the filing got very uncomfortable for her very fast. Patricia Ellison now lived in New Hampshire. She was 43 and had a different job and, according to Ray, had been waiting for someone to call her about this for 9 years. She agreed to provide a written statement. When Ray told Victoria, she was sitting on Logan's couch after dinner with Emma asleep against her side. Emma had a habit, recently developed, of falling asleep wherever she happened to be sitting when tiredness hit, with complete disregard for whose shoulder or lap was most convenient. Victoria had gone still when Emma's head dropped against her arm, and she hadn't moved since. "She agreed," Victoria said quietly, so as not to wake Emma. "Statements coming by email tonight," Ray said through the phone Logan was holding out between them. "Her account and yours have 4 overlapping structural elements. Same playbook." Victoria looked down at Emma's sleeping face. Her expression was complicated enough that Logan looked away, giving her the privacy of it. "Tell her thank you," Victoria said. Her voice was even, but it cost her something. "I will," Ray said. "Get some rest, both of you." Marcus arrived on a Thursday. Logan found out from Ray, who found out from a contact at the Hartford rental agency who owed him a favor. Marcus Hale had rented a car in Hartford at 10 in the morning, and the direction of travel was consistent with Callaway. Logan called Morrow first, then Sylvia. Then he drove to the motel, where Victoria was working at the small desk in room 6, the drive open, her reading glasses on. He knocked. She opened the door and looked at his face. "He's coming today," she said. "Should be here by 3. She took that in, took off her glasses and set them on the desk behind her. "Sylvia?" "She called Morrow this morning. We've got 2 county deputies who will be visible in the area by 2 o'clock. Ray will be at the house." He paused. "The brief is filed, officially on record, as of this morning." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She looked at the room, the small desk, the folded wheelchair by the wall, the few things she'd accumulated in the weeks she'd been here. She'd made it a little bit hers, he noticed. A scarf on the hook by the door, a photograph on the nightstand. He'd never seen it up close, but he thought it might be old, from before all of this. "I don't want to be here when he arrives," she said. "Not here." She looked at him. "I want to be at your house." Logan had expected the motel, had assumed she'd want to be somewhere that felt contained, manageable. He hadn't expected this. "Okay," he said. "I want him to come to me," she said. "Not catch me in a parking lot or on the street. I want to be somewhere that means something and see his face when he realizes what's waiting for him." Logan thought about the porch, the yellow light, the front steps where he'd sat 100 evenings watching the street. "Then that's where we'll be," he said. Yeah. They told Emma there was going to be a difficult meeting that afternoon and that she was going to spend the afternoon with Mrs. Patton. Emma processed this with the 6-year-old's radar for the fact that something real was happening, looked between Logan and Victoria with her mother's dark eyes, and asked, "Is the bad man coming?" Logan crouched down to her level. "Who told you about a bad man?" "Nobody told me," Emma said. "I could tell." He and Victoria exchanged a look over Emma's head. "There's a man who hasn't been nice to Victoria," Logan said carefully. "We're going to talk to him today and tell him that has to stop." Emma looked at Victoria. "Are you scared?" Victoria looked back at her, steady. "A little," she said, "but not as much as I used to be." Emma nodded as if this was an acceptable answer. Then she wrapped her arms around Victoria's neck, brief and fierce, the way she did with Logan when she meant business. "You can be scared a little," she said into Victoria's shoulder. "It's still brave." Logan watched Victoria's hands come up and hold Emma back, carefully, like something that might disappear. And he thought about all the things the two of them had found in each other in these weeks. The 6-year-old and the woman who'd spent years building walls. And he didn't have language for it. Marcus Hale pulled up to Logan's house at 2:47 in the afternoon. Logan knew the exact time because he'd been checking his watch every few minutes since 2:30, which was a habit he had when he was trying to keep himself calm, and it wasn't working especially well. Victoria was sitting on the front porch in her chair. Logan was beside her on the steps. Ray was inside the house with the front window slightly open, his phone ready. Sylvia was parked 2 houses down. Morrow's deputy was visible in a cruiser at the end of the street, making no particular effort to be subtle about it. The car that pulled up was a black sedan, new, the kind that cost more than Logan earned in 4 months. The man who got out was not what Logan had built in his head. Marcus Hale was 50, trim, with the kind of face that was used to being the most composed in any room. He wore a good coat, unbuttoned, and he moved with the specific unhurried quality of someone who had spent decades operating from a position of certainty. He looked at the deputy's car at the end of the street. He looked at the house, and then he looked at the porch. His eyes found Victoria, and something moved through his expression, something that started like satisfaction and then hit a wall when it registered the rest. The wheelchair not hidden or apologized for, but placed squarely on that porch like a statement. Logan sitting next to her, the deputy down the street. He walked up to the end of the front path and stopped. "Victoria," he said. His voice was warm in the way that certain kinds of danger are warm. "You are looking well." "Marcus," she said. Her voice was level. Logan had watched her get to level, had watched her, in the last hour before he arrived, do whatever internal work she'd needed to do to get there, sitting very still on the porch and looking at the street and not talking much. She was there now, fully there. "I'd like to talk to you privately," Marcus said. His eyes moved to Logan, a brief, assessing look that cataloged him, and then moved on. The look you give something that isn't a real obstacle yet. "This is private," Victoria said. "This is about as private as it's going to get." He tilted his head slightly. "You've filed a petition." "I have." That was unwise. "It was overdue," she said. Marcus's expression shifted slightly. The warmth cooled a few degrees. "The medical assessment has been countered," Victoria said. "We have our own assessment. We also have the hospital records for my admission, including the medication log and the timing of the documents I signed while I had enough morphine in me that I couldn't tell you what day it was." She paused. "We have a financial analysis of the Delaware trust structure and its connection to the holding company that received my stake. We have a statement from Patricia Ellison." Something happened to Marcus's face at that name. Small, fast, controlled, but Logan caught it, and he understood what it meant. That the name landed, that it was a variable Marcus had believed was contained. "We have everything filed," Victoria continued, "and officially on record, and the filing happened this morning, which means it was already done before you arrived. There's nothing you can do about that by being here." Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at Logan again. A different look this time, longer, with something calculating behind it. "Your friend here," he said, "might want to think about whether this is something he wants his name attached to." Logan had been very deliberately not speaking because this was Victoria's moment and not his, and she'd earned every second of it. But he held Marcus's gaze and said quietly, "My name's been attached to it for 2 months. Doesn't seem like a problem." Marcus looked at him for a beat, then back at Victoria. "You've convinced someone to help you," he said, and there was something dismissive in it, something that was trying to reduce what was in front of him to something manageable. "That doesn't change the legal reality," Victoria said, cutting through him cleanly, "is that you built a shell corporation structure 3 years before you met me, used it to strip me of my company while I was incapacitated, paid witnesses to say I was drunk on the night of an accident you provoked, and have spent 7 years using financial pressure and physical intimidation to keep me quiet. And all of that is documented and filed." She looked at him directly, and she didn't look away. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Marcus. I want you to understand that. Not because everything is fixed, it isn't yet, but because I am done running from you. Whatever you came here to say, it's not going to work. Whatever you came here to see, me scared, me folding, that's not what's in front of you." Marcus stood at the end of the path and looked at her for a long moment. The street was quiet. A cold wind moved down from the field at the end of the block, rattling the bare branches of the oak in Logan's front yard. The deputy's cruiser sat at the corner, engine idling. The porch light was on, even in the afternoon, the way it always was. Marcus's jaw tightened, just once. Then he looked away. Not dramatically, not with anything that looked like defeat, just a small disconnection, like a man revising a calculation. He buttoned his coat. He looked back at the house one more time, at nothing specific. "You'll be hearing from my attorneys," he said. "Ours are looking forward to it," Victoria said. He walked back to the sedan. He got in. He drove away. Logan exhaled through his nose, slow, quiet. Victoria's hands were gripped white on the armrests of her chair. She was staring straight ahead at the empty street where the car had been. "You okay?" Logan said. A long pause. "I'm shaking," she said. Her voice was steady, but when he looked at her hands it was true. a fine tremor running through them. "You didn't show it," he said. "I know." She breathed. "I've been terrified of that man for 7 years, and I just looked him in the face and—" She stopped, swallowed. "I didn't look away." "No," Logan said. "You didn't." She was quiet for a moment more. Then she pressed both palms flat on her thighs, took a slow breath, and something in her straightened him. Not performance, not control reasserting itself, but something more real than that. Something that looked like a person deciding who they were from this point forward. "Call Ray," she said. "Tell him it's done." Logan pulled out his phone. He made the call with one hand, and with the other, without really deciding to, he reached over and covered her still trembling hands with his. She didn't pull away. They sat there on this porch in the cold January afternoon until the deputy's cruiser finally pulled slowly away from the corner, and the street was just a street again, ordinary and quiet, the porch light burning yellow in the thin winter light. Marcus's attorneys responded within 48 hours. The filing came through Sylvia's office email at 6 in the morning on a Saturday, which Sylvia described as a deliberate choice, a way of signaling that the other side had unlimited resources and no interest in conventional working hours. Logan was at her office by 8. Victoria was already there when he arrived, coffee in hand, reading glasses on, the document open on the table in front of her. "They're filing a motion to dismiss on jurisdictional grounds," Sylvia said. She was standing at her window with her arms crossed, looking at the street below, arguing that the original documents were executed in Connecticut, and any challenge to them belongs in a Connecticut court, not here. "Can they do that?" Logan asked. "They can try. It'll cost them time, and it'll cost us time." Sylvia turned from the window. "What it tells me is that they don't want this in front of a local judge who can actually look at the consent capacity question. They want to move it somewhere they have more influence." She looked at Victoria. "Which means the consent capacity argument is the one that scares them." Victoria was reading the document with the focused stillness she brought to anything that mattered. She turned a page. "They've attached a new declaration from the physician." "I saw it." "He's changed his characterization. Last time it was cognitive distortion. This time it's a diagnosis." Victoria's voice was flat. "A diagnosis that didn't exist in any of my medical records until 10 days ago." The room was quiet for a moment. "Can we prove it's manufactured?" Logan asked. "We can challenge the methodology and the timeline," Sylvia said, "which is going to require a medical expert, which I've already called about." She paused. "Her name is Dr. Carol Marsh. She's a neuropsychologist at a university hospital in Boston, and she has reviewed documentation in cases like this before. She's expensive." Victoria looked up from the document. "I'll handle the cost." "You're sure?" "Whatever I have left, yes." She said it without drama, without martyrdom, just a statement of priority. Sylvia nodded. "Then I'll confirm her engagement today." Logan looked at Victoria. She was looking back down at the document, jaw set, turning another page. There was something different about her since the afternoon on the porch, something he was still figuring out how to describe. She'd always been strong, but before it had been the kind of strength that was mostly about endurance, about surviving pressure. This was different. This was the kind that moved forward. The jurisdictional motion took 3 weeks to resolve. 3 weeks was fast, Sylvia said. It felt long in the way that all waiting felt long when the thing you were waiting on mattered this much. Logan worked. He had a job in February, a full renovation on a farmhouse 12 miles outside of town, a structural overhaul that required most of his attention and all of his physical energy, and was good in the way that physical work was always good when his head was full of things he couldn't fix with his hands. Victoria spent the 3 weeks building the evidentiary case with Sylvia. They worked most days at Sylvia's office, sometimes going past 9 at night, and Logan would pick up dinner and bring it over without being asked, and leave it on the reception desk and sometimes stay for an hour and sometimes not, depending on what they needed. What he noticed in the edges of those 3 weeks was that Victoria was slowly coming back to herself. Not the self she'd been when she arrived in Callaway, soaking wet, watching exits, holding everything she had behind a wall, but something older than that, something that the last several years had buried under survival. She was sharp in meetings with Sylvia in a way that was almost aggressive, the way it had been when she'd talked about her company in those early diner conversations. She had opinions about the legal strategy. She pushed back on Sylvia twice in ways that were right, and Sylvia acknowledged they were right, which Logan thought was important. Being right when it mattered, being taken seriously when it mattered. She laughed more, not constantly. She wasn't the kind of person who laughed constantly, and Logan didn't trust those people anyway. But genuinely, and at things that were actually funny, and sometimes she laughed before he finished the sentence, which meant she was tracking with him in a way he hadn't noticed starting. Emma noticed too. Emma had started calling Victoria by name without the slight formal caution she'd used at the beginning, which, in Emma's social vocabulary, was a significant reclassification. The jurisdictional motion was denied on a Tuesday morning. Sylvia called Logan first, which he was grateful for because it meant he could hold it together on the phone and then sit in his truck for a minute before he drove to the motel to tell Victoria in person. She was at the desk when he knocked. She opened the door and looked at him, and he said, "Denied," and she sat down, not in her chair, on the edge of the bed, and pressed her hands together and looked at the floor for a long moment without saying anything. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. Sylvia wants to meet this afternoon. Dr. Marsh has submitted her preliminary report, and Sylvia thinks we can file the consent challenge within 10 days. Victoria looked up. 10 days. If the report holds. She nodded slowly, and then she said unexpectedly, "I need to call my brother." Logan looked at her. "I know," she said. "I know. But if this actually starts moving, if this actually becomes something that goes public, he's going to find out, and I'd rather he found out from me." "What happened between you two?" Logan asked. He'd been careful with that question for months. Victoria was quiet for a moment. He knew something was wrong. After the accident, after the settlement, he came to see me, and I could see that he knew something wasn't right about the situation, and I was so deep inside the NDA and the fear that She stopped. "I told him I was fine. I made him believe it. He pushed, and I got angry, and eventually he stopped pushing. And you felt guilty about it since. He was trying to help me, and I shut the door on him." She looked at her hands. "That's not something you explain in a phone call." "No," Logan said. "But you start with a phone call anyway." She looked at him. "You don't have to have the whole conversation at once," he said. "You just have to open the door again." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she reached for her phone. She called her brother, whose name was Daniel, and Logan stepped outside and sat on the covered walkway and looked at the parking lot and gave her 20 minutes. When she came back to the door, her eyes were red at the edges, and she looked like someone who had been through something and come out the other side of it slightly rearranged. "He's driving up on Saturday," she said. Logan nodded. "He was angry," she said, "and then he wasn't angry, and then we both cried, which I wasn't expecting." She paused. "He said he'd been waiting for me to call for 3 years. "Brothers do that," Logan said. "How would you know? You don't have any." "I had a sister," Logan said. "Same principle." Victoria looked at him. "Had?" "She moved to Portland and married a man who owns a kayak rental business," Logan said, "which is practically the same as losing her." Victoria stared at him for a second and then laughed, the involuntary kind, the kind that surprised her, and Logan felt it in his chest the way he always did. Dr. Marsh's report was 43 pages. Logan didn't read all of it. It was written in the specific dense language of expert witnesses who needed to be absolutely unassailable in court. What Sylvia walked them through was the substance, that the medication log from Victoria's hospital admission established a documented period of pharmacological incapacitation during which she received morphine and 2 other sedating medications, that the timeline of document signing fell within this period, and that the cognitive capacity standard required for contractual consent was not met. More critically, Dr. Marsh had examined the methodology used by Marcus's physician and found 5 specific procedural errors, one of which she described in writing as incompatible with standard diagnostic practice and suggestive of a predetermined conclusion. That's as close as an expert witness gets to calling someone a liar in a report, Sylvia said. Victoria was reading the relevant section for the third time. Will it hold in front of a judge? Dr. Marsh has testified 17 times in the last 8 years and has never been successfully impeached on methodology, Sylvia said. I wouldn't have brought her in if I wasn't confident. File it, Victoria said. Sylvia filed the consent challenge that Friday. What happened in the 4 weeks that followed was, in Logan's experience of it, mostly unglamorous. It was phone calls and document requests, and Sylvia working at hours that suggested she had a different relationship with sleep than most people. It was Ray cross-referencing corporate records and building a timeline of the Delaware Trust that showed, conclusively, that Marcus had made 3 similar maneuvers with 2 other business partners before Victoria. The 2014 Connecticut case, and a smaller one from 2011 that hadn't resulted in a civil suit but had involved a documented pattern of financial pressure. Patricia Ellison's statement arrived by email, 8 pages, methodical and specific, and reading it was both satisfying and awful in the way that confirmation always was. The confirmation that this had happened before, that Victoria hadn't been a special case but a next one, that Marcus Hale had built a system and run it multiple times. Victoria read Patricia's statement alone. She didn't tell Logan she was reading it, but he could tell by the way she was when he saw her afterward, quieter than usual, turned slightly inward, processing something. She described the same thing, Victoria said, when they were sitting on his porch that evening. February cold, both of them in their coats. Emma was asleep inside. The same progression, the same way the warmth turned into management, the way you started organizing your behavior around his reactions without realizing you were doing it. She was looking at the street. I thought it was something about me. For years, I thought it was something specifically about me that made it possible. It wasn't something about you, Logan said. I know that now. She paused. Knowing it and feeling it are different things. Yeah, he said. They are. She turned to look at him, and there was something in her expression that was both tired and more open than he'd seen it. How did you do it? After Claire? He hadn't been expecting that. He looked at the porch railing. Badly, he said. For a long time. He turned the coffee cup in his hands. I kept the Friday dinners because I couldn't figure out any other way to make the grief feel organized. Like if I put it in a specific place, it wouldn't be everywhere all the time. Did it work? Not really, he considered. But it gave me somewhere to put it until I figured out how to carry it differently. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I've never had a ritual for it, she said. Any of it. I just kept moving and called it surviving. You were surviving, Logan said. I was. She looked at the porch light. I think I want to start doing something different than surviving. He looked at her. She was still looking at the light, and there was something on her face that was both vulnerable and decided. The combination that happened when someone knew what they wanted but hadn't said it out loud yet. That seems like a good idea, Logan said. She looked at him. Something passed between them. Not quite acknowledged, not quite named, but present in the way that things are present right before you find the words for them. Then her phone rang. Sylvia's name on the screen. She looked at Logan once more, briefly, and then answered. Sylvia's voice on that call was different. Logan could hear it through the phone from where he was sitting, a contained energy, the sound of someone delivering news they had been building toward for weeks. The judge had reviewed the preliminary filings in the consent challenge and agreed to expedite the hearing. More significantly, the Attorney General's office in Connecticut had opened a preliminary inquiry into the Delaware Trust structure, prompted by a referral from Sylvia that Logan hadn't known she'd made. The inquiry was early, not yet an investigation, but it was open. It was official. It was the thing that changed the quality of the air around all of this. Marcus's attorneys filed a continuance request 20 minutes after the expedited hearing was granted, Sylvia said, which tells you exactly how they feel about facing the consent question with Dr. Marsh's report on the table. Victoria had her phone pressed to her ear and her elbow on her knee and her forehead down on her hand. Logan couldn't see her face. How long before the hearing? She asked. 3 weeks. 4 at most. And the AG inquiry? It's going to take longer. Months, possibly. But it opens a door. Sylvia paused. Victoria, this is real now. It's been real, but now it's the kind of real where his position is actively deteriorating and he knows it. Victoria lifted her head. She was looking at the end of the porch, at the dark street beyond the yellow light. Okay, she said. I'll be at your office Monday morning. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. 3 weeks, Logan said. 3 weeks, she repeated. She let out a slow breath. He's going to try something before the hearing. That's what he does when he's losing control of a situation. He tries something. What kind of something? Last time he felt cornered, he sent someone to photograph my attorney's family. She paused. He'll escalate before he concedes. Logan sat with that. He thought about Morrow, about Ray, about the deputy who'd been parked at the corner. I'll talk to Morrow tomorrow, he said. Tell him the hearing's been scheduled. I'll talk to him myself, Victoria said. Logan looked at her. It's my case, she said. Not defensive, just direct. I should be the one briefing the sheriff, not through you. I want to walk in there and say it myself. Okay, Logan said. Logan, you've done more than... She stopped, started again. I keep running out of words for what you've done. I'm not good at that. You don't have to be good at it. I want to be, she said. I want to be better at it, saying the thing when it's true instead of holding it because saying it feels like exposure. He looked at her. The porch light threw a warm yellow across the side of her face. Then say it, he said, quietly, not pushing, just leaving the space. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't pushed that plate across the table, she said. I think about that night a lot. I was so close to just keeping moving, getting back in the rain and going to the next town and starting the same thing over. She paused. You just pushed it across like it was obvious, like it was easy. It wasn't easy, Logan said. That plate meant something. You knew that. I know. She held his gaze. That's why it mattered. The street was dark and quiet. The cold had settled fully into the night. Inside, somewhere in the back of the house, a floorboard creaked. The house settling, the familiar sound of it, the one Logan had stopped noticing after the first year. I meant what I said, he told her, that night at the motel, about not going anywhere. I know you did, she said. I still mean it, he said. Not just for the case, I mean past the case, whatever is on the other side of this. She looked at him, and there it was, the thing they'd been circling for weeks, the thing that had been building in the edges of all these ordinary evenings and kitchen dinners and porch conversations. She looked at him, and she didn't look away. I know, she said again, but quieter, different. He reached over and she let him take her hand. Not like the porch 3 weeks ago, when he'd covered her trembling hands to steady her. Different from that. She turned her hand over and held his back. They sat there in the cold February night and didn't say anything else for a while, and didn't need to. Marcus made his move 8 days before the hearing. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't threatening. It was in the way that truly calculated moves often were, administrative. His attorneys filed a motion to introduce new evidence, a series of financial documents allegedly showing that Victoria had been an active participant in the company transfers, that she had signed additional documents willingly in the months following her hospital discharge, that the incapacitation argument was undermined by her subsequent conduct. Sylvia called at 7 in the morning. Logan was making Emma's lunch. He could hear Sylvia's restraint on the phone, the way she was choosing words carefully. It's manufactured, Sylvia said. The documents have signatures, but the notarization dates are wrong by a margin that's going to be very hard to explain. Ray found it in 40 minutes. A short pause. He overcorrected. He panicked, and he overcorrected. You can prove the forgery? We can demonstrate the notarization discrepancy clearly, and we have a forensic document examiner who can speak to it. Sylvia's voice gained something. Not triumph, but a kind of compressed certainty. Logan, forging legal documents in response to an existing legal filing is not a minor thing. This isn't just a bad strategic move. This is potentially criminal. The word landed in the kitchen like something solid. I'm coming in, Logan said. Bring Victoria. We need to move quickly. Uh, Victoria was already at Sylvia's office when Logan arrived. She was standing, not sitting, standing with her hands flat on the conference table and the new filing open in front of her. And she looked up when he came in with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not scared, not composed, something between rage and clarity. "He forged documents," she said. "I know. He has done everything. 7 years of every kind of pressure. And now he forged documents to present to a judge because he is losing." She shook her head slowly. "He never thought he'd lose. That's the part I don't think he accounted for. He never actually planned for a world where I didn't eventually give up. He planned for compliance," Sylvia said from her desk. "Not for what he actually got." Victoria looked at Logan, and there was something on her face in that moment. A settling, a stillness. The kind that wasn't resignation, but its opposite. The kind that meant something was over, not because it had been taken from her, but because she had finished it herself. "File everything," she said to Sylvia. "The forgery evidence, the notarization discrepancy, all of it. And send the forensic report to the AG's office today." "Already drafting," Sylvia said. Victoria turned back to the table and looked at the documents. She pressed her palms flat on the surface again, and she breathed. And Logan stood across from her and watched the woman who had come through his diner door, soaking wet and terrified, stand in the middle of what she had built from nothing. The evidence, the allies, the sheer refusal to disappear. And he thought that he had never seen anything quite like it. The specific way a person looks when they are finally, after a very long time, standing on ground that belongs to them. The hearing was in 8 days. The hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning on a Thursday in late February, in a courtroom on the second floor of the county courthouse that smelled like old wood and radiator heat, and the particular staleness of a building that had been processing human problems for longer than anyone currently inside it had been alive. Logan drove Victoria there himself. They didn't talk much on the way, not because there was nothing to say, but because they'd already said most of what mattered over the preceding 8 days in Sylvia's office, and at Logan's kitchen table, and on the porch in the cold evenings, going over everything until going over it more stopped helping. By the morning of the hearing, there was nothing left to prepare. There was only the doing of it. Victoria had her folder on her lap and was looking out the passenger window at the winter fields passing by, bare and gray-brown under a pale sky. Logan kept both hands on the wheel and didn't try to fill the silence. "I'm not nervous," she said when they were about 2 miles out. "Okay," he said. "I mean, I am, but it's different from before. Every time I've had to face anything related to this, the nervousness was about whether I was going to hold together, whether I was going to break." She paused. "This morning, I feel like I might actually be angry instead." "Angry is good," Logan said. "Is it? Angry means you believe you should have won, which you should have. So yeah." She turned from the window and looked at him. "When did you get wise?" "I've always been wise," he said. "You just weren't paying attention." She shook her head, but the corner of her mouth moved. Sylvia was on the courthouse steps when they pulled up, talking into her phone with the focused intensity of someone finishing a sentence that had legal consequences. She ended the call when she saw them and came down the steps with her briefcase and an expression that was as close to energized as Sylvia got, which wasn't demonstrative, but was real. "Dr. Marsh landed last night," she said. "She's already inside. Ray sent the final timeline confirmation this morning. The notarization dates on Marcus's documents are off by 11 days, which is not a rounding error." She looked at Victoria. "How are you?" "Ready," Victoria said. Sylvia held her gaze for a moment. "Good," she said, and turned toward the door. Daniel was inside, waiting in the hallway near the courtroom entrance. He was 41, dark-haired like Victoria, with the careful watchfulness of someone who had spent 3 years wondering and not being allowed to ask. He'd arrived in Callaway the previous Saturday, and the reunion had happened in Logan's kitchen over terrible coffee and a dinner that nobody ate much of, and it had been hard and necessary, and by the end of the evening, the two of them had been sitting at the table alone, talking in the low, careful voices of people reconstructing something that had been damaged but not destroyed. He hugged Victoria when he saw her, briefly and firmly, and she let him. "You've got this," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at Logan over her shoulder, and Logan gave him a short nod, and Daniel nodded back. Marcus's legal team was 3 people, all of them in suits that communicated exactly the kind of resources they were drawing from. Marcus himself sat at the opposing table in a charcoal jacket and said nothing, watching the room with the composed attention of someone who had been in difficult rooms before and believed still that composure was the same as control. Logan sat in the gallery with Daniel. He watched Victoria take her seat beside Sylvia at the plaintiff's table and set her folder down and fold her hands on top of it, and he thought about the woman who had pushed through the diner door in November, soaking wet, watching exits, holding herself together with what he'd later understand was the last available margin. And he thought about the distance between that moment and this one, and what it had taken to cross it, and he felt something that was too complicated to name, but settled in him like ballast. The judge was a woman named Honorable Patricia Graves, 60 years old, with reading glasses she pushed up onto her forehead when she wasn't using them, and a way of looking at the room that suggested she had no patience for anything that wasted her time. She called the proceedings to order and got to work. What followed was not dramatic in the way that legal proceedings are in films. There were no stunning reversals in the middle of testimony, no moments where Marcus's composure cracked publicly and irrevocably in front of the room. What happened was more like the methodical dismantling of a structure. Piece by piece, document by document, with Dr. Marsh on the stand for nearly 2 hours, while Marcus's attorneys cross-examined her on her methodology and failed each time to find the edge they needed. Dr. Marsh was, as Sylvia had promised, unimpeachable. She answered every challenge to her methods with the specific patience of someone who had anticipated the question, which she had, because she'd been doing this for 17 years and had heard every version of every challenge and had a clear documented answer for each one. The manufactured diagnosis Marcus had filed crumbled under her analysis, not with drama, but with the kind of quiet finality that is somehow worse than drama, the finality of something being simply proven false, efficiently and completely, in front of a judge who was writing things down. The hospital records came in. The medication log was what Sylvia had said it would be. Clear, time-stamped, unambiguous. The documents Victoria had signed were signed at 10:47 in the morning on the day in question. The last dosage of the primary sedating medication had been administered at 9:15. Her attending physician's notes from that morning described her as, quote, disoriented and minimally responsive to verbal stimulation. When Marcus's attorneys objected to the characterization, Judge Graves looked at them over her glasses for a moment before overruling. The notarization discrepancy in Marcus's new documents was addressed in a separate filing that Sylvia walked through with the forensic examiner Logan had never met, a compact, precise woman named Elise Howe, who had spent 12 years doing document authentication and who explained the 11-day discrepancy in terms that were so straightforward and so technically airtight that the courtroom went very quiet when she finished. Marcus's lead attorney asked for a brief recess. Judge Graves granted 15 minutes. In the hallway, Logan found Victoria near the window at the end of the corridor. Daniel was giving her space, hanging back by the courtroom door. Logan walked over and stood beside her. She was looking out at the parking lot below, the cars, the ordinary daylight Thursday world going about its business. She's going to rule today, Victoria said. I can tell. What do you think she'll do? I think she's been doing this long enough that she's already decided. Victoria paused. The forensic documents alone, filing forged documents in response to an active motion, isn't a small thing. It's contempt, at minimum. Sylvia said potentially criminal. Potentially. Victoria turned from the window. I don't need him in handcuffs. I just need the case to hold. It's holding, Logan said. She looked at him. How can you tell? Because you're not nervous anymore, he said. You said you were angry earlier. You look like something different now. She considered that. Settled, she said finally. I feel settled. He nodded. Logan. She looked at him directly, with the same quality she'd had on the porch in January when she'd said she was done running. That decided, clear-eyed thing. Whatever happens in there in the next hour, whatever the ruling is, whatever comes after it, I want you to know that you changed what was possible for me. Not just the case. The whole thing. She stopped. I don't know how to say it without sounding like it's not enough. It's enough, he said. I mean, I know what you mean, he said, and it goes both ways. She looked at him for a moment, and then she looked away down the corridor, and she breathed, and he could see her settling that away somewhere to come back to later. The courtroom door opened. Sylvia appeared and nodded at them. They went back in. Judge Graves ruled in just over 20 minutes. She granted the consent capacity challenge in full, finding that the documentation established, clearly and without reasonable dispute, that Victoria's capacity to enter contractual agreements had been materially compromised at the time of signing. The company transfer documents were voided. The settlement agreement, including the NDA, was struck down on the grounds that it had been executed under conditions of coercion and incapacitation. The false accusations that had been entered into official records during the 7-year period were ordered expunged. As to the forged documents Marcus's team had filed, Judge Graves noted, in language that was judicial and therefore measured but contained a quality that felt, to Logan sitting in the gallery, like controlled fury, that the matter had been referred to the state attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges related to the submission of fraudulent evidence in an ongoing legal proceeding. She looked at Marcus when she said that part. Marcus's expression did not change, but Logan watched his hands on the table, and the right one pressed flat against the surface once, briefly, and that was the tell. The only tell he showed, but it was there. The gavel came down. In the gallery, Daniel made a sound beside Logan, a short, exhaled sound like something releasing. Logan looked at the plaintiff's table. Sylvia was writing. Victoria was sitting very still, her hands flat on the folder in front of her, looking at some point ahead of her that wasn't quite the room. Then she turned and found Logan's face in the gallery, and whatever expression he had, he didn't know exactly what it was, made her close her eyes for a second. Just 1 second. Then she opened them again and turned back to Sylvia, who was already talking about the next steps. The hallway afterward was both louder and quieter than Logan had expected. Louder because Daniel was there, and Ray had come for the ruling, and Donna Kessler had shown up without being asked, and was standing near the door with her coat buttoned wrong, which was the most uncharacteristic thing Logan had ever seen her do, and everyone was talking at once. Quieter because Victoria was moving through all of it at a slight remove, accepting the words, the hugs, Daniel's grip on her shoulder, but present in the way that people sometimes are when something enormous has just happened, and the full weight of it hasn't finished arriving yet. Logan waited. When the hallway had thinned out, Ray heading for his car, Daniel and Donna drifting toward the exit in conversation, Sylvia fielding a call in the corner, Logan found Victoria near the window again. Same window as before. Different light now, the morning having moved into afternoon while they were inside. It's done, he said. The case is done, she said. The AG investigation will take longer. The criminal referral, even longer. She paused. He's not going to prison tomorrow. No, but he's not untouchable anymore. She said it slowly, like she was testing the reality of it. Everything is on record. Everything is official. The things he did exist in documents now that he can't make disappear. She looked down at her folder. That's what I needed. More than anything else, that's the thing I needed. The truth being on record, Logan said. Yes. She lifted her eyes to the window. Because for 7 years the truth was in my head, and nobody official had written it down anywhere. And that's the loneliest thing. Not the running, not the fear, the part where you know what happened and the world's paperwork says something different. Logan looked at the side of her face. The thin winter light came through the window, and she looked tired and real and more herself than he had ever seen her. The world's paperwork says something different now, he said. She was quiet for a moment. It does, she said. The drive back to Callaway was easier than the drive out had been. Victoria had her window down 2 inches even though it was February, the cold air coming in thin and sharp, and she didn't explain it and Logan didn't ask. He figured she needed to feel the outside of the day, needed the physical reality of it. The cold, the speed, the fields passing, to confirm that this was actually happening and not some extended version of hope she'd built up and was about to watch collapse. They stopped for gas outside of town. Victoria went inside to get coffee and came back with 2 cups and handed him one without asking how he took it, which was exactly right because she had been watching how he took his coffee since November. "I've been thinking," she said when they were back on the road. "About?" "About staying." Logan kept his eyes on the road. He kept his hand steady on the wheel. He didn't say anything because he could feel the shape of what she was working toward, and he didn't want to rush it. "Callaway," she said, "I've been thinking about staying in Callaway." "What about the company?" "The company is mine again. Legally. It's going to take time to rebuild what he damaged. There are clients who left, there's a reputation that needs... It's going to be a lot of work." She looked at the road. "But I can do that work from anywhere. I was running a national operation remotely before any of this started. The geography is flexible." "So you could be anywhere," Logan said. "I could," she said, "but I keep coming back to the same answer when I ask myself where I want to be." She paused. "And the answer has to do with a very specific diner and a cracked kitchen tile and a 6-year-old who gives me her best drawings." Logan looked at the road. "And her father," Victoria said, quieter. If he... "Victoria," he said, "let me finish. I practiced this." He almost smiled. "Okay." "I'm not good at this," she said. "I've spent years not letting people close because letting people close felt like handing them away to hurt me. And I know that's not fixed just because one judge said the right thing today. I know I'm still..." She stopped. "I'm still working on some of it, a lot of it. I'm going to need to keep working on it." "I know," he said, "and you have a daughter who needs consistency and stability, and I don't want to be someone who comes into that and..." "Emma made you a drawing of our family," Logan said. "She's put you in it for 2 months. She's not confused about what she wants." "I know, but that's Emma. What about you?" He was quiet for a moment. The town was coming up on the horizon, the water tower, the church steeple, the cluster of buildings that was Callaway's modest skyline. "7 years ago, I stopped eating the second dinner," he said. "Ordered it every week and pushed it to the empty seat and didn't touch it. Not because it made sense, because I couldn't figure out any other way to say, she was here. She mattered. There's a space that belongs to her." He turned the truck onto Main Street. "And then one night someone sat down in that seat, and I pushed the plate toward her, and it wasn't a betrayal. It was just the next true thing." Victoria was looking at him. "You're the next true thing," he said. "You have been for a while." She looked down at the coffee cup in her hands. He could see her throat move. "Okay," she said, very quietly. "Okay," he said. Done. She bought a house 4 streets over from Logan's in March. It was a single-story house on a corner lot, renovated sometime in the previous decade by someone with decent taste. And the thing that had apparently decided it for her, she told Logan this the day she signed the papers, almost as an afterthought, was that it had a wide front porch. She'd walked up to it and stood on it and looked at the street, and she'd thought about the porch on Logan's house and about what that porch meant, the light he'd kept burning on it, and she'd put in an offer the same afternoon. Logan came over on the first Saturday after she moved in and fixed the 2 sticking doors and the kitchen faucet that dripped, and Victoria made them both lunch from a kitchen that was slowly accumulating the kind of lived-in evidence she'd once described wanting, things on the counter, magnets on the fridge, the particular chaos of a space actually being used. Emma came too, ostensibly to help, in practice to supervise from a stool at the kitchen island and offer commentary. "You need a plant," Emma told Victoria. "I kill plants," Victoria said. "You'll get better." "I don't think it works like that." "Dad killed a cactus once," Emma said, in the tone of someone sharing important institutional knowledge. "And now our tomatoes are fine." "The tomatoes were your project," Logan said, from under the sink. "I managed them," Emma said. "There's a difference." Victoria caught Logan's eye from across the kitchen. He had his head halfway under the cabinet and was trying not to laugh. And she was trying not to either, and Emma was completely serious, listing the plants she thought would do well in the window by the front door. It was the most ordinary afternoon. It was also, in the way that ordinary afternoons sometimes are, when you have spent a long time not having them, almost more than Logan could look at directly. Spring came late that year the way it often did in that part of the state, slow and reluctant, frost still showing up in April mornings long after it had worn out its welcome. But by May, the town had turned the corner into something genuinely warm. and the trees along Logan Street had gone from bare to tentative green to full, the kind of green that felt like a statement. The AG's investigation into Marcus's corporate structure was ongoing. It had expanded in March to include a review of the 2011 case, in addition to Patricia Ellison's 2014 matter, and the attorney who'd filed the forged documents had quietly withdrawn from practice pending his own review. Marcus himself had retained new counsel and was, as Sylvia described it, very busy cooperating with investigators on certain limited matters in exchange for considerations that had not yet been formalized. He had not contacted Victoria. He would not, Sylvia believed, contact Victoria again. Not because he'd developed a conscience, but because there was nothing left to gain from it and a great deal left to lose. Victoria had spent March and April rebuilding the company, calls and video meetings from her home office, emails that went late into the evening, the slow and difficult work of reaching out to former clients and explaining what had happened and asking for the chance to demonstrate, through actual work, that what they'd valued was still there. Some of them came back. Some didn't. She didn't pretend the ones who didn't was fine. 3 of the biggest clients went with a competitor 2 years ago, she told Logan one evening. They were on her porch, the May evening warm enough to sit without coats for the first time. They're happy there. They're not coming back. And I spent a week being angry about it before I figured out that being angry about it was making me worse at everything. So you stopped? I stopped performing the anger, she said. The actual anger took longer. She paused. But I've got 12 active contracts and 2 more in discussion, and that's a real company again. That's something I can build from. You already built it once from scratch, Logan said. I know. I was just pointing out that I'm doing it. She looked at him. Because 6 months ago, I wasn't sure I was going to get to. He looked back at her. You were always going to get there, he said. You don't know that. I know that you drove yourself 4 towns over, he said. You were already fighting. I just showed up while you were doing it. She was quiet for a moment. You showed up, she said, and you stayed. That's not a small thing. That is, in my experience, a very rare thing. Doesn't do. Daniel came back in May for a weekend, and they all had dinner together. Daniel, Victoria, Logan, Emma, and Mrs. Patton, who had been included on Emma's personal authority and who sat at the end of the table telling stories about Callaway in the 80s that were either completely true or completely fabricated, and nobody could tell which, and it didn't especially matter. Emma sat between Victoria and Daniel, treating Daniel with the considering assessment she reserved for new entrants into her social circle, and by the end of the evening she'd declared him pretty nice for an uncle. Daniel had looked at Victoria when Emma said that, and something had passed across his face, something that was almost too much to look at for its fullness. She called me uncle, he said afterward quietly, when Emma had gone to help Mrs. Patton find her coat. You are her uncle, Victoria said. Approximately. Approximately, Daniel repeated. He looked at Logan, then back at Victoria. You're happy, he said, like he was reporting an observation he was still processing. Getting there, Victoria said. Don't qualify it, Daniel said. I've been waiting 3 years to see it. Just let me have it. Victoria looked at him for a moment, and then she said without qualifying it, Yes. He put his arm around her and she leaned into him, and Logan looked away and found Emma standing in the kitchen doorway, watching all of them with her mother's patient eyes and an expression of 6-year-old satisfaction. Good dinner, Emma said. Yeah, Logan agreed. In June, Emma asked the question. They were at Logan's house on a Sunday, all 3 of them. Victoria had come for breakfast and stayed into the afternoon, which happened most Sundays without anyone deciding it officially. Emma was on the living room floor with a drawing project of some scale and complexity that had been explained to Logan twice and that he still didn't entirely understand, and Logan and Victoria were at the kitchen table with coffee, talking about nothing in particular. Her tomato plant that had, against all probability, survived its first month. A structural issue in the barn roof at the farmhouse job he was wrapping up, whether Mercer's had changed their brisket recipe or whether he was imagining it. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was holding a drawing. She looked at Victoria, then at Logan, then back at Victoria. Are you and Dad going to get married? She asked. The kitchen went quiet the way kitchens go quiet. When a 6-year-old says the thing that 2 adults have been carefully not saying. Logan looked at his coffee. Victoria looked at Emma. Emma looked at both of them with the expression of someone who has asked a direct question and is prepared to wait for an actual answer. "That's a pretty big question," Victoria said carefully. "I know," Emma said. That's why I'm asking." "What made you think about that?" Logan asked. Emma considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. "Because you're always here," she said to Victoria. "And when you're not here, Dad is looking at his phone. And Mrs. Patton says that when people do that, it means something." She paused. "Also, I made a drawing." She held up the drawing. It was a house, the front of it, with a yellow porch light and 3 figures standing on the steps. A tall one, and a small one, and a medium one in a wheelchair. They were all holding hands. Victoria looked at the drawing for a long moment. Logan looked at the drawing. Emma looked at both of them. "I made us a family," Emma said, simply, and held the drawing out to Victoria. Victoria took it. She held it in both hands and looked at it, and she was very still for a second, and then she pressed her lips together and looked up at the ceiling for a moment in the way people do when they are trying to keep something from spilling over. Then she looked at Emma and said, her voice careful and real, "This is the best drawing you've ever made." Emma nodded. She already knew. "Can I keep it?" Victoria asked. "That's why I made it," Emma said, and went back to her project. Logan and Victoria were married on the second Saturday in October. They did it on the front porch of Logan's house because that was the place that had mattered most. The place where something had been decided in January cold with a deputy's cruiser at the corner and a man who had thought he could still win standing at the end of the walk. They'd talked about other options, the town hall, the small park on Birch, and they kept coming back to the porch. The porch made sense in a way the other places didn't. Sylvia officiated, which she'd done once before years ago and professed to not enjoy, and then agreed to do when asked with a quickness that contradicted the disclaimer. Ray sat in the front row with Donna Kessler, who had worn her good coat and appeared to be taking mental notes. Daniel flew in from Hartford. Mrs. Patton sat in the second row and cried audibly from the opening words, which Emma found hilarious, and which she would describe to people for years afterward. Emma wore a dress she had selected herself, and which was several shades of yellow and slightly too big and perfect. She stood between Logan and Victoria during the ceremony because that was where she'd decided she belonged, and nobody argued with her, and she was right. The afternoon was warm for October. That particular gift that fall sometimes gives, a last warm afternoon right at the edge of the season turning. The oak tree in the front yard had gone amber and gold, and the light through it fell across the porch in patterns that moved when the wind came through. Logan said what he'd spent 2 months figuring out how to say, which in the end was not especially long. He said that he had spent 7 years thinking that the space across the table from him was a closed space, a space that belonged to grief and memory, and that he'd been wrong, not about the grief, which was real and always would be, but about the closing. He said that the best thing he knew about love was that it didn't take away what came before. It just proved that there was more room than you thought. Victoria had written hers down because she'd known she wouldn't trust herself to remember it. She held the paper and she read it, and her voice was steady the whole way through except for one sentence in the middle, when she said that for a very long time she had organized her life around protecting herself from the next loss, and that what Logan had shown her, slowly, without fanfare, by the entirely unremarkable act of continuing to show up, was that protection was not the same as living. She said that Emma had given her back something she hadn't known she'd lost, which was the knowledge that being loved without conditions was still possible. She said she was choosing them both, fully, with no contingencies and no escape routes, and that choosing that way was the bravest thing she'd ever done. Emma leaned against her when she said that, just slightly, in the unselfconscious way of a child expressing something too big for words. There's a photograph from that afternoon that Daniel took on his phone. Not posed, not planned. Logan and Victoria on the porch steps after the ceremony, Emma between them with her yellow dress and her serious face, the amber oak behind them, the porch light on even in the afternoon, the way it always was. Logan has the photograph on the kitchen counter now. The same counter with the same cracked tile above the stove that he never got around to replacing, The same stack of drawings and the same coffee maker and the same imperfect accumulation of a life actually being lived. Victoria's things are mixed in with his things now in the way that takes time. Her reading glasses beside his keys, her particular brand of too-strong coffee in the cabinet, the hand control modifications on the truck he'd learned to drive without thinking about. The porch light burns every evening. It always has. For a long time, it was an act of grief, a way of keeping a shape in the dark where someone used to be. Logan doesn't think that's what it is anymore. Or maybe it's both things. Maybe the grief and the hope are not as separate as he once needed them to be. That's the thing about loss that nobody tells you when you're in the worst of it. It doesn't go away and you don't get over it. And both of those things are true, and neither of them is the whole story. The whole story is that you carry it forward and it changes shape as you go. And one day you look at what you're carrying and you realize it's become something else alongside the grief. Not instead of it, alongside it. Victoria's company has 12 employees now. She runs it from the home office and travels when she needs to, and is back in Callaway before Emma comes home from school on the days she's gone. She is not always easy to be around. She is still sharp to the point of cutting sometimes, still reaches for control when things feel uncertain, still goes quiet in a way that closes doors when she's frightened. Logan has learned most of her patterns the way you learn a house. Not all at once, but by living in it, by paying attention to where the drafts come in. She is learning his patterns too. She is the one who noticed, 2 months into their marriage, that Logan went somewhere internal on certain Friday evenings. Not sad exactly, just occupied with something old, and she stopped asking him to come back from it and started sitting near it instead. That was the right thing to do, and he'd never been able to explain why, but she'd known anyway. Emma is 7 now, finishing 2nd grade, and she has opinions about everything with an intensity that exhausts Logan and delights him equally. She tells people she has 2 parents, in the specific, declarative way that means she has thought about it and decided and is not interested in discussing qualifications. At school, there is a photograph on the classroom family wall, the one Daniel took, and Emma explained it to her teacher on the first day with the same direct simplicity she'd used when she handed Victoria that drawing. That's my mom and dad, and that's our house. Marcus Hale's criminal case is still ongoing. It will probably be ongoing for a while longer. These things move at the pace they move, and the outcome is not certain. And Victoria has made a deliberate choice not to organize her days around it. She follows it when there are updates. She does not wait for it. There is a difference between justice and resolution. And she has had the resolution. The record, the ruling, the truth in official writing that can no longer be erased. And the justice is still in process, and she is not willing to put her life on hold for its timetable. That is, in its way, the bravest thing of all. Not the standing on the porch in January, not the hearing, not the rebuilding of the company, but this, the decision to stop organizing your entire self around what was done to you and to build, stubbornly and imperfectly and with other people's help, the life that always should have been yours. Ray Coulter comes to dinner sometimes on Sundays. He and Emma have an ongoing chess game that has been in progress since February, and that Ray insists he is winning and Emma insists he is not. And the board lives on the side table in Logan's living room and gets examined by both parties with great seriousness whenever they're in the same room. Donna Kessler upgraded the ramp outside the motel. She didn't tell anyone she was doing it. Logan drove past one afternoon in spring, and it was just there. New concrete, properly graded, built to last. He called Donna and told her it looked good. She said she'd been meaning to fix it for years. Some things need the right moment. Some things need someone to arrive who makes the moment matter. That November night feels, in memory, like it belongs to a different season of all their lives, which it does. The rain and the bell over the diner door and the soaking wet woman who scanned exits and looked at an untouched plate and didn't quite let herself believe what it meant. The man who sat in a booth every Friday and ordered 2 dinners and told himself this was about grief, which it was, and didn't understand yet that it was also about waiting, which it was too. Neither of them was ready. Both of them showed up anyway. That is the whole secret. Not readiness. Readiness is a myth people tell themselves while they're waiting for permission that never arrives. The real thing is showing up in the condition you're actually in, broken parts and all, and choosing, despite everything you know about how things can go wrong, to push the plate across the table. The light was on when Victoria came home that evening. It's still on.